Hi, everyone. Welcome to Office Hours. If you're watching on YouTube, you can find out more about what we do at officehours.global. First hour is general discussion about virtual and media production. And the second hour is usually something we want to spend a little more time on Saturdays and Sundays. We spend more time on general discussion. So anyways, that's what we're doing today. So definitely throw your questions in. It's a great crew here today. You have a lot of good answers. And so hopefully we'll get more questions in. We've got a lot of questions already starting, but we've got 2 hours to cover. So this is a good time to throw those in. And the person that's going to be reading the questions today, I think is new, Kenneth Jones. Hey, Kenneth. I mean, not new to the panel, but new to asking questions. And so take it away, Kenneth.
Well, I'd like to. If I could only see a question screen that would tell me what to read, I'll do that.
You don't see the question screen?
I do not.
I'll read the first question while you figure that out. All right. So first question is, what was your first Apple product? This is from Guy Cochran in Seattle. Go ahead, Guy.
I didn't mean to throw the ball to myself right out the gate. I was hoping some other people would go first. The first one that I got to play with, so to speak, was 1985. I had an Apple IIe that was at school and really got into doing print work. So I was the editor-in-chief in 5th grade of the high school newspaper, or the elementary school newspaper. So it was what was the name of that app? Print Shop was the name of the app back in 1985. Right. And then my first real Apple Mac that we bought was a Performa 600 CD, which was 1992. So it's a pretty weak, wimpy machine by today's standards. I think it was 32 megahertz and had like 8 megabytes of RAM. Yeah. But I had Photoshop on it in high school, learning Photoshop. But I think it was before layers. I think it was 2.0. Yeah. That was my first couple.
That's great, John.
In college in the mid-'80s, 86, 87, I ran the print shop in the college, and we used an Apple IIe running VisiCalc. I ran VisiCalc on a floppy drive. All the monthly reports are all done on VisiCalc, Apple II.
That's great. Go ahead, Tom.
Well, I'm a latecomer, so I went to the iPad 2, the iMac, and the iPhone 4S, all in 2011.
Nice. Go ahead, John.
My first product was, our family had an Apple IIgs with 16 glorious colors. And when I was in high school one summer, I spent all my summer earnings on a Lime G3 iMac.
Go ahead, Mitchell.
Apple II, and I was really good at Star Trek.
Yeah, so the funny thing is, like, my father had a law firm in the second floor of a building in Butler, Pennsylvania. And the first floor, they sold Franklin's. Franklin's were out for just a little bit, and they were basically copies of the Apple II. And so I spent a lot of hours down there in probably 81, 82, playing Aztec. I think that was mostly what I played. I learned a little program a little bit and played Aztec. And then I stopped. I really kept on saying I need to get an Apple IIe. And my father was like, it's $2,000. We're not going to spend that right now. And I found that if I stopped eating and just laid on the couch and whimpering that for 3 days, it started on Friday and went all the way through Sunday. And finally my dad was like, okay, we're going to get you a computer. Like, he couldn't take it any longer. And then I spent about 12 hours a day on it. So I was, I played a couple games, but mostly what I did was program. You know, I learned I'd already learned a little bit of basic on a Trash 80. And, so I just kept on writing code. So that's what I did. Next question.
Okay, well, I can try this from the fine print in the On Deck bunch from Mitchell Hill. He asks or says, we hate it when they happen. What are some spectacular fails you've had? You mean like reader screens, for example? Come on, share the pain.
Go ahead, Mitchell.
I do have some pain here that I can share. By the way, you should refresh your browser, Kenneth. But beyond that, I was working on fixing something in my rack, and the chair leg got caught around the power cord from my Sony ZV-E10. And the next thing I heard was crash, and I look over, and it was lying on the floor on its side. Now, the analogy here is that, you know when you stub your toe, and there's that couple of seconds where it doesn't hurt, but you know the pain is coming. It's coming, it's inevitable, it's going to hurt. And that's how I felt when I dropped it. I thought, I just spent $1,500 on a new powered Zoom, yada, yada, yada. Not a thing happened to it. It was amazing. It must have fallen on the microphone or some other disposable piece of the camera. So, as fails go, most recently that one scared the heck out of me.
Go ahead, Tom.
Oh, I got to go way back for this one. It was in the 70s. I worked for the CBS affiliate here in town. And back in the 70s, the way you got your network feed was via microwave across the country. Being in the mountain time zone, we didn't follow live network. We had to record everything and play it back later. Well, I was running videotape this particular night. It was late. It was the late night movie. And I was chatting up the guy in the control room rather than watching my tapes. And I had to go back, and I all of a sudden saw the movie stop. And I realized I haven't rewound the last half of the movie.
There you go. Go ahead, Guy.
Yeah, talking about those earlier Apple computers, it reminded me of a not totally spectacular fail, but I used to work the graveyard shift at a print shop, and they were relying on me to run this. It's called the Cactus machine. It was a $250,000 machine that would make these 50-inch prints by however long you wanted to go. I had to run all these prints overnight, and I went to rip raster image process these files to print, and the computer wouldn't turn on. So I was like, what the heck? And it was a DEC Alpha computer, and back in the 90s, this was a very, very expensive computer. And I was like, man, I'm toast. If I don't have these things printed by morning, it was a rush overnight job, then I'm gonna be fired. So I just went to another machine that had the same computer, which was a film scanner. It was called the Solitaire, very expensive piece of equipment. I'm 20 years old. I grab a screwdriver, take the thing apart, grab the power supply out of the one that was for the film scanner, put it in the other machine. It fired up, got the prints done, and saved the day. But it was almost a totally spectacular fail because it was for a huge client, and pulled it off though.
We had one where we had a bunch. We were in a hotel. We had worked out with the hotel. I might have told this a long time ago, but since you asked the question, this is probably the biggest fail. We literally call it the event that will not be named. And so we had all these stars, A-level stars, like AA, AAA level stars at this hotel. And we made this deal that they're going to do a hangout, so they all talk to each other. And they're all in different hotel rooms to talk to each other and then go out to the world. And it was a big fundraiser. And it was really hard to do in the first place because some of the actors won't let us in the room. It wasn't their hotel room. It was like a meeting room, but they would go in before us, and then they locked the door, and then their security was like, you can't come in. And so it was like all this chaos around it. We finally got it all working. But what happened was we were supposed to get 10 megs a second up and down for each room, which we had worked out with the hotel. And the problem was the hotel, some person at the hotel thought it was really cool to give the code out that was giving us 10 megs a second to the VIPs. They just thought, it's a good way to get, here's you'll have better internet if you use this, and thinking, I guess, that there's an unlimited amount of bandwidth going into the building. So what happens, what that means is it tests perfectly all day. And then at 6:30, the event starts at 7. At 6:30, we see it at 8. At 6:45, we see it at 6. At 6:55, we're at 2. And we're less than 1 meg per second at 7 o'clock when the whole thing's supposed to start. And it was hard because you're just sitting there, you're seeing one or two frames a second of really famous people, and there's nothing you can do. It's just like there's nothing you can do but watch it. There's no and for me, I happen to be sitting right in front of Rihanna, so he's just staring at me like, what's going on here? Just confused, and I was just like, it was. I try to tell people like that it literally changed all the molecules of our company in one. It was like probably the 4th or 5th hangout we did, and I think that the success of the hangouts that we did after that was because the very 3 days later we were in King's Cross in London doing one with Richard Branson. It was called War on Drugs or whatever. It was like this big Intelligence Squared or something like that. And when we walked into I had literally came out of that, and I walked into that building, and we were working with a company called F1. They were managing because they're managing the bandwidth, and we go down to the basement. I said, I noticed that there's 27 hops out of the build to get out of the building from our location. Can we just get a direct connection from the WAN? And they said, like, okay, sure. They didn't care. And this is a big building. It's like the Guardian newspaper is in it and stuff like that, or was in it at the time. And so we go down and I said, we're going to put a QoS box right here, right at the WAN, and we're going to hand you back bandwidth. And then we'll make sure that we have the bandwidth we need for the show. And if anything goes wrong, I mean, I'm sorry, no, nothing will go wrong. I said, but you may see some degradation in the bandwidth when the show is going. You know, like when the show is running, we may clamp down your bandwidth a little bit. And we came out, and the guy from F1 said, so when you say degradation, what do you mean? And I said, oh, just shut it off. It'll take them 2 hours to figure this out. And I was like, I'm not, you know, I get paid to do this one show. Like after the last show, I was like, nobody's using my bandwidth. I'm taking over the building. And so we did that. And we got great bandwidth, but suddenly all the Wi-Fi stopped working. Like literally nothing worked in the whole building except for the stream. And so then we were having communication problems. We ended up like doing all of our comms over cell phone, and so it was a whole new problem that we had there. And so it was an overcorrection. And yes, by the time the event ended, 10 minutes before the event ended, security, the editor for The Guardian, the owner of the building were all standing in front of me. Like, what did you just do to our building? You know, and so we weren't invited back to the King's Cross. But anyway, so the it's a nice theater though, just in case you're wondering. So anyway, those were two fails that happened, one really bad fail and one that the event went great, but I probably overcorrected just a little bit. And then after that, we got pretty heavy duty about when you hear all my things about bandwidth, and there's a primary and there's a backup, and you know, we do go into buildings like I don't care about other people's stuff. like you know, this is I figure out how to be nice enough to make sure that no one complains, but that's about it. Like we're you know, it's our job to get the thing out the door. So anyway, those are some of the fails, and I think that one of the powerful things about fails is that they do make you much better. Like you get swatted in the nose hard enough, and you just go, okay, how do I never have that happen again? I think one of the problems that I had is that I was so paranoid that a lot of my employees in Pixel Core had a hard time getting. They weren't scared. Every once in a while, I was like, they're not scared enough, you know, because they don't fail, because we had so many redundancies, because in the early days we had so many failures. Then I was like, I'm never going to have, there's a whole bunch of, I never will have this happen again. You know, the reason we bought everything was like, you know, 6 months before that we had, or no, a year before that, I guess, we had a Salesforce one where all of our rental stuff at London just didn't show up, you know, and so we had to like hack through the show, you know, like, and tie things together. And I literally had a client that had to lay down. Like they thought their job was over. And so then we started buying all of our own equipment. And that's what Blackmagic empowered us to do, is like we were renting more expensive equipment, and then we started buying Blackmagic equipment so that we could own our destiny. You know, like, you know, I was like, I'd rather have this stuff rather than Grass Valley or whatever. I want to be able to own it and be able to put together the kit. So that was our introduction to Blackmagic hardware. Next question.
My goodness. Guy Cochran from Seattle has a question. He says, how far can you run a USB-C cable to an ATEM Mini?
Go ahead, Tom.
Well, I'm in the middle of a project where I'm going to be moving my ATEM into a rack, and I need a longer cable than just 3 to 6 feet. And so the answer became one that I had to find, and Guy Cochran helped me find this cable here that's like...
I was going to say, I thought you were going to point to the cat.
No, I'm not going to point to the cat. I'm pointing to the cable that the cat made necessary. It's actually this guy here, and it's fiber. And it does have a host in and a device in, but it's working fine. I mean, I'm coming through it right now.
Mm-hmm. And how long is that cable?
That's 10 meters, and it cost me $120. And you can get the 15 meter for $20 more.
There you go. Very cool. Next question.
Mitchell Hill wants to know, what's happened to the great cooking shows we were running? Did we learn something important? I might have an idea to pitch.
Go ahead, Mitchell.
I shouldn't have put my name up so quickly because I wanted to hear what happened first. But yeah, I have an idea that I might want to pitch. So answer and let me know what happened, and I'll come back. Sorry that I was too trigger friendly there.
No, that's all. That's all good. Yeah. So I think that, you know, the main thing is that we there was a lot of moving parts with people that were hosting. So, but Shannon had a loss in the family, and I think Damianti and Hosmuk had things that some traveling to do, and it kind of just got out of, like we just had to slow down for a minute, and then this is what happens with a lot of things. Things are like a gel. Something holds a space, and as soon as you pull it out, it just fills in with other things. And so, so I think that, and I think that for us, we were trying to figure out, the next step for us was trying to figure out how to get more participation. So when we first started the cooking, it was, there was 60, 70 people watching, and there was a lot of questions and everything else. By the time we closed it up, it was just a handful of people that were in the, in that, and that might've been the time frame. It might've been what we were doing. We couldn't quite figure out, how to crack that nut. So we were having fun doing it. So I think a lot of times we were doing it because I was learning so much about cooking, from Damianti. It's so much fun to cook with other people on Zoom. I mean, I have to admit that it was just a lot of fun. And after I got over the trouble of putting it up, like what I did is I finally had my little kit, and I had, it was all in a box. Like there's a box that is the cooking kit. And as soon as I got that, it was easy, because then I just opened the box and I could get it all set up in 15 minutes, and it was not a big deal. The first couple were very stressful because it was hours of figuring out where I wanted to put things and how to do it. But once I had a box for it, it was much easier. And so, but I think that I was enjoying doing it. I think Shannon was enjoying doing it a lot. But we weren't getting as many people jumping on to do it with us, and there wasn't a lot of conversation, so we weren't sure, how it was working, in that area. So if we started it up again, we would definitely probably do it and we are planning to do a test of this next week. So the cooking's coming back. We want to make sure that as we go forward is that we just have to see, participation. Like, is it really going to, are people going to jump on and watch it and take part in it, and, that kind of thing. So just seeing if it'll gel a little bit more as we go through it. I think that the summer might be a little hard to do it, so we're going to test it, this summer, a couple times this summer. And then I think the fall is usually a better time to get going on that kind of thing. Summer people are out over the weekends, and so it's just harder to get people to settle in. But it's what I will say, excuse me, it's so much fun. Like it is, I will say that it's a lot of fun, and I will probably be more participatory in it once my kids are going they go to the Pittsburgh for the summer, or not for the summer, for like a month and a half in the middle of the summer every year. So I'll have more time. The Saturday mornings and Sunday mornings are kind of belong to my kids. That was also hard for me to have something else in that schedule. So I have to admit that once we've kind of carved out, we kind of turn things off for the summer, and I'm a little resistant until the end of the summer to turn it back on again. Anything back on for what I'm doing, and just because I just trying to spend more time on stuff at home. Go ahead, Mitchell.
Yeah, here's my pitch.
Okay, here you go. Here it is.
It's my elevator pitch. It's unconfirmed rumor right now. But anyhow, I don't know if we want another cooking show, but one of my very dear friends is Bob Bowersox, who used to have In the Kitchen with Bob on QVC. And I just see in his eye that he kind of misses doing that. He's semi-retired now, and he's doing writing and acting and stuff like that. I think he might be up for doing a cooking show. So, well,
what might be fun is to think about maybe having him join the cooking show with Damianti, and then see if he likes it. I think that would be the best way to get him in, to see if it works for him, is have him just do one with Damianti. She's really good. Like, she's just really, really good at leading one in this format that we're doing. It's a different kind of show, and we'd love to have him involved. Yeah, absolutely.
Sure, I'll ask him.
Yeah, absolutely. That'd be great. I mean, I think that cooking is a huge opportunity, and I think that there's the reason we got into it, and the reason we were working with Mad in the Kitchen and Damianti and everything else, is I just think that cooking is a massive opportunity, to do a lot of things, to make, and not just as an opportunity to do production, but an opportunity to make a difference. I mean, people should not be eating things out of boxes, in my opinion. Yep. Like I won't get political about it or health about it, but I buy almost everything raw. So I'm very much from raw cooking, and I'm a little bit. And so people, and the only reason I feel like people do that is because they don't know how to do the other part. Like, they don't know how to cook things, and so they buy things out of boxes.
One of Bob's specialties is creating meals in 30 minutes. for the active lifestyle. So I just thought that might be relevant today.
I think that's great. Yeah, I think that'd be fantastic. So it'd be fun to have them. Yeah, absolutely. Next question.
Scott Mueller from Germantown, New York asks, can you give us a list of programs and applications that a Zoom event producer should have a proficient knowledge of to bring the most value and differentiation to clients?
I would say, the things that you need to know, Photoshop, either Motion or After Effects. You need to have some way to generate, content. As far as playback goes, I think that you need to know something about how to do a playback. How are you going to do playback? And that can be done in a lot of different ways, but you need to understand that thing. I think an ATEM of some kind, is something, so Mix Effect Pro. And then the big ones that I do think you're going to want to learn how to do are, understanding ZoomOSC, Zoom ISO, Isadora. Those are things that, as we think about larger events, those are things that for smaller events, you can definitely do it on your own. My wife runs Zoom events, not events. She runs Zoom meetings, and she runs meetings for people every week for a fair number of people all the time with the vanilla version with literally no hardware or software other than Zoom. And so she, now she has incredibly prepared from a presentation perspective, but she can do all of that on her own. So you don't need any of these things to run a Zoom event. But those are the software that I would think about. Go ahead, John.
And don't underestimate the importance of customer service and building relationships. Your skills will get you the first event, but where you make it sustainable is getting repeat customers.
Yeah, good guy.
Yeah, I'm trying to figure out exactly what he's trying to do, because some of the things that we think of are more of an engineering type job. So when I look at the list that I would put in a higher, it would be, the basics, Google Sheets, Unity Comms, PowerPoint / Keynote, Stream Decks, Companion. Getting further down the line, ZoomOSC, and figuring out how to use that with Companion to get your Stream Deck buttons ready to fire off. If you want to, do a 2-up, a 3-up. Playback would be MIDI or something similar, an ATEM Playout B. StageTimer.io is a big one for me, being able to have those countdowns, and with the Stream Deck as well, you can add seconds or add minutes with a button. And then if you're talking more of an engineer type, vMix in the cloud, if you're doing what Greg Gibson's doing, we're going way down the line. I guess that's away from producer, but if you're a one-man type production crew, then AWS, NDI, getting into encoders like the Pearl or some kind of software encoding. We just use vMix a lot of times, but on a different instance. But those are a lot of the things.
Next question.
Douglas Carmichael asks, how would you compare Max MSP from Cycling 74 to Isadora in terms of functionality and focus? I built a MIDI Clock-to-MIDI Note translator in Max MSP, and I'm wondering if Isadora could do the same thing.
I just haven't used Max MSP for so long. I don't know. I can't. In my memory, I would say that Max MSP is a little bit more geeky. I think that you could do anything that you're doing with. I think you could do almost. I can't think of anything that I would do my knowledge of Max MSP is limited. So I don't want to overstate it. But I will say from my memory of Max MSP, and again, it's been years since I've opened it up. I would say that I can't think of anything that I could do in Max MSP that I couldn't do in Isadora. Like I don't think that there's any features there that I couldn't do. But we'd have to wait for someone that has more Max MSP experience. Maybe if you see Todd Reynolds or some of the other folks like that on, they may have more information. But I can't think of anything that I was doing on Max MSP that I couldn't do in Isadora. Next question.
James Fosling from Minneapolis asks, when fading out of HDR video, it can appear uneven, like it's following the tone map of the image. Is there a way to fade more evenly?
I think it would depend on what you're using to fade it. So what app are you using to create the fade? And then are you fading to a color, or are you fading to are you fading to a color, or are you fading to another image? And then finally, what kind of app are you? monitor are you looking at? So if you're looking at a monitor that is doing tone mapping, it could be retone mapping that in real time as it's displaying it. So it may not be actually happening in the video. It may be happening in your monitor, because that's, like a Mac will be trying to do tone mapping for you, and it may not be getting that just right. And so I think we probably need to know a little bit more information about what is happening there. It shouldn't. I mean, you do have to make sure that your whole project, whether it's Final Cut or Resolve, and I will admit my understanding of HDR and anything other than Resolve is very low. If I'm doing HDR work right now, I'd still do it all in Resolve. So I don't. I know that works well. So I don't know in other apps how they handle it. Next question.
Vincent Alvarez from Bellingham, Washington says, NTSC, PAL, PAL-M, SEACAM, due to the advent of digital TV, do these TV formats still exist?
Go ahead, Mitchell.
Yes, they exist in my nightmares. NTSC, never the same color twice, I guess, was one of the worst, but not so much. I mean, unless you have an old tape somewhere that, and it doesn't have to be that old. It could be a Betacam tape. It could be standard def NTSC. It's pretty much in our past, and I'm not looking back too quickly.
Yeah. I mean, I think we are slowly. I mean, we're still in a frame rate war between 50 and 60, but but that's the only thing we really are seeing. A lot of people we still have to think about that. Globally, but I think that is the only thing. I mean, I think most of the HD signals are kind of moving past all of these older signals. Next question.
James Fosline in Minneapolis asks, I haven't used my Wacom tablet in a while, and it's not working. I don't see a place for batteries in the pen. Anything I'm forgetting?
Go ahead, Guy.
Yeah, I would say have you checked the drivers to see if they've been updated? Well, then that's most likely the culprit, but there's no batteries in that. It's not like the Apple Pen with the iPad where it charges. It's just a device with a tip on it that communicates.
Yeah. It's the driver was the first thing I thought of as well. Next question.
Mike Beardmore from Reading in the UK says some HDMI to DVI adapters or splitters work with all monitors from a Raspberry Pi and TV boxes, and some don't. Has Office Hours done a primer on HDMI signaling?
We haven't. I'm trying to think of some HDMI DVI. I will admit that I just don't. DVI is something I will admit that I avoid like the plague. So VGA and DVI I just try to not interact with at all. So I don't know if I plugged anything in with a DVI cable for it could be getting close to almost a decade. That I haven't interacted with the DVI cable. Go ahead, Mitchell.
Yeah, it would be cool to have a matrix because I agree with Alex. DVI is a kind of a weird beast to deal with, but DisplayPort, HDMI splitters, some work, some don't. I'm at about 60% success rate buying off of Amazon.
There are two different kinds of DVI cables as well. So I think it's the DVI-I and the DVI-D. And so you want to look at that cable really carefully as to, I think it has a slash or a cross. And you're going to want to, one of them. And so the thing, if it's a DVI, so I think that I'm going to guess that the reason that some work and some don't is some of them are DVI-I and some of them are DVI-D. And I think that you're going to find if you really look closely at the DVI cables that they're not the same. They say DVI, but they're not the same cable. Next question.
James Foslin again from Minneapolis. When shooting video with an iPhone, are there any other principles to follow differently from a cinema camera or other mirrorless?
Go ahead, Tom.
Well, get used to zooming with your feet. Move in closer, then back up. Also, don't be afraid to get different positions or perspectives that those other cameras can't.
You good, Guy?
Yeah, I guess I was looking at more from a technical perspective, and that's remembering to turn off, any notifications that could, or phone calls. So I put it in airplane mode if I'm going to shoot, and then I use a different app. I'll use Filmic Pro, and then I'll increase the bit rate. So they have the ability to shoot ProRes. So be aware of your storage, because you can quickly fill one up just with your own internal stuff. So be careful not running out. And then battery life, of course, there's different batteries. And then I use various grips. For the iPad, I have one of the Axoon ones that has the extended battery. And then, of course, audio. Do you want to bring it in with a USB-C like we use? Sometimes we'll use a Zoom F8 or one of these other USB-C output type devices. I'm doing it with the iPad Pro, but with the iPhone, you can do it with the Lightning connector. And then just be aware of shaky footage. Like, it does a good job of stabilizing, but if you can, maybe even look at a DJI Osmo to get those nice smooth shots, because of the small form factor. A lot of times people, like Tom was saying, it'll just be shaky. So you want to figure out a way to stabilize that footage. So the DJI Osmo line's a great line to look at. And Filmic could even control those. So you can even set those up and control them remotely with another device. And then focus, tapping on the screen. So if it's a person, you could tap on them and you can lock exposure, click and hold, and it'll lock. You'll see an AF lock, so you can lock it down, and you could drag up exposure up and down. So those are a couple tips.
Yeah, I have shot. We got into this habit of wanting to have it open really quickly, and Facebook is kind of a funny thing. When Facebook Live was in its infancy stage, you wanted to go live, and if you showed a still or a countdown clock or something basic, when you started up Facebook, you would lose 80% of your viewers like that. Like, they would see something. If they didn't see something happening, people just move on. So it was like a huge deal for us to make sure that there was something going on. And so when we were doing remote events, what we would do is we would go out, and I would literally take my phone with an Osmo and drive around the city that we're in, do an approaching shot to the event center. We had some, oftentimes I'd throw the phone up and get some time lapses of us building and stuff like that. And we would literally, in the day before the shoot, build this kind of location shoot with the iPhone. That it wasn't a big deal. It was just like this little iPhone. I ran around with an Osmo and shot it, and it worked great. And it was just, we just play it out, because what it allowed us to do is we'd hit play on it and then hit go on Facebook, and it would just give us just a little bit of leader to get into the show. It was literally all we had to do is get 15 seconds, so that we just knew it was ramping up, but we didn't have that uncomfortable start, because you also didn't want to start to an empty room. It was, the chaos of improper engineering is really painful as far as figuring out how to get things to go right. Anyway, next question.
Jonas Dautel from Stuttgart asks, now that ZoomOSC 4.1 is out, should we do some after-hours labs on how to automate productions with it and build custom Zoom behavior?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, we should. Yeah, so we'll work on, folks should reach out to me, and I just need to know who's going to be where, and we'll set up labs every morning if people want to. I think that it's really important for us to get our head around it and take full advantage of the product. Because here's the other thing is I don't have a sense that this is the last update that's going to happen with ZoomOSC and ISO this year. And so I think that we also want to keep up, because I think otherwise we're going to fall behind in understanding what it's doing, because I think it's going to be moving fast. I think that Zoom is about to really accelerate what's happening. So I think that we want to definitely start thinking about regular labs. And Jonas, since you asked the question, let me know if you're willing to, whatever time, outside of office hours that you want to do labs, let us know. And I think we should all jump into it and play with it. Absolutely. Next question.
Guy Cochran from Seattle ponders, how would you get more than 1 gigabit per second from the Ubiquiti Dream Machine Pro?
Go ahead, John.
2 models of the Dream Machine Pro, the standard and the special edition. And both units have dual WAN ports, and then they have SFP plus connectors on them. So SFP plus 10 gig out to a LAN, out to a 10 gig switch, and that's exactly what I'm setting up at my house.
Go ahead, Tom.
That plus the device is rated for 3.5 gigabit throughput with your intrusion detection and your intrusion prevention systems. So you can then of course, send that 10 gig through multiple ports into your network.
Good guy.
Yeah, I'm starting to try to figure this out because I have a Dream Machine and then I have 2 of the Ubiquiti switches, and then there's 2 SFP modules, and the ones that I had just happened to be just 1 gig, so now I need to go buy those. They're about $60 a piece, and so you put one of those in, and then Jeff Keithley turned me on to this other device. I'm not sure if we're able to get the graphic in time. I was a little late on it, but actually I can pull it up on my machine. It's called a switch aggregation, and it looks like,
Yeah, I know that device. Switch aggregator. Yeah.
this thing. So then you add it comes bare, but then you put, like, this one's an 810G SFP port. So the reason why I'm asking this is because, we have this problem where we're starting to do 4K over NDI and starting to saturate the network. So this is the device that you would pair with the Ubiquiti Dream Machine to be able to get 10G. So that's the device, or one way, in addition to the way the other guys talked about.
Next question.
Douglas Carmichael asks, sorry, I lost the screen. One moment. Bill mentioned being out of practice when returning to production. As an audio person who produces electronic music, would it be worthwhile to purchase my own console, an A&H SQ-5 or 6, so I can keep up my mixing skills no matter where life takes me?
Go ahead, Mitchell.
Douglas, I got to sort of look into this question and read deeply into it. I think you're asking us to talk you into spending money on something that you may or may not need. I don't think a specific console is going to make any difference. It's the best practices you apply to your craft that means something. The best way to do that is to work on it. So let us be the ones that tell you, save your money, don't spend it on the next thing to come along. Just practice in other ways.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think I would. I would even think about software mixers. I mean, because if you're doing music, you don't necessarily. I mean, a lot of the things work the same way, but otherwise, even something like an X32 or possibly an XR18, those are all things that are much less expensive than the Allen Heath, and I think that you probably find it to be just as useful for what you're doing. Next question.
Gregory Wheeler asks, how do large houses of worship get their live YouTube stream so clear? We're using 4K cameras and an ATEM Mini Pro to YouTube and have 10 megabit.
We'd have to look at what the 4K. So there's so many things that make things clear or not clear. So the thing that you want to look at here is what kind of 4K camera. So just because it says it's a 4K camera doesn't, like, how big is the chip. So the chip size is going to make a difference on how something looks. The lenses, the type of lenses that you're using, are they built into a PTZ or are they actual external lenses? Those are some of those are, and then lighting, lighting's going to be something there. Are you doing a lot of close-ups or wides? Wides will tend to feel like they look a lot softer in a compressed environment than close-ups do. So even though it might look sharp to you, especially at 10 megs a second, it may not look as good on a stream. So 10 megs a second is what I would call minimum, for what you're doing. So for a 1080p stream, the other question is are you doing 720 or 1080? A 1080 stream, which is all you can do from a Mac Mini Pro, you want to, I don't know what the maximum output on the Mac Mini Pro is. I actually don't stream from my ATEMs, and so I don't know. Is it 8 megs a second? I think it was 8. And for some reason that sticks in my head as 8 is the top end. At 8 megs a second, I would want at least 15 megs up, to manage that at minimum. And that's if no one else is using it, because I want some headroom, for that to be there. So 10 megs a second is great, is okay, but you have to make sure that you're on a separate VLAN, so you're not sharing that with anybody else in the church. So those are the things you want to kind of think about as you put this together. Next question.
Vincent Alvarez from Bellingham asks, next week, my office of 20 people is being moved across town. Are there any moving tips you have for moving day? For example, always carry a Sharpie and tape for labeling items and so forth?
Go ahead, John.
If you're paying somebody to move you, I would strongly recommend making sure everyone uses the same size boxes with matching lids.
Yes.
That makes it way easier to stack things.
Yeah, the folding ones that, kind of just fold up and they have kind of interleaving tops to them are super useful. I find them to be, we've packed a lot of things into a lot of those there, if you're not going to store them for a long time. But go ahead, John. Tom.
If you're going to change anything with your network connectivity and your IT department's going to come in and set up your computers, have everybody pack their keyboard, their mouse, anything that goes with that computer in a separate box from everything else they're packing. I know it'll be light, but label it so that the IT guys can come in and get that done for you.
I will admit that every time I've ever moved, I've always moved my own stuff. My own computers, like my own computer, my own camera, like that's a box that I control, literally in my own car, and I will move it over. That may not be allowed with what your company's doing, but I just, all kinds of things happen with moving, and so I will not what I will say is that I do not allow third parties to have physical access to my computers. It should be IT that's doing those things, but that is for me, that's a big no-no. Go ahead, Tom.
We had to move multiple departments into a 20-story building over a period of 5 weeks. And no one had even Ethernet cards at that time.
Right.
So it was a huge project. Every computer had to be touched by an IT person. And this was successful for us.
I think probably the best moving story that I have is that when ILM is up in the building that I'm in now was the old ILM building, or one of a group of them. There was 2,000 people at one time at Kerner, and they had to move all 2,000 people to Letterman, which is down across the bridge into San Francisco. And now the way that all the artists worked is they all just had they had their monitor and a keyboard. And they were talking to a server room. They didn't have a computer next to their desk or anything else. And so anyway, when they went to move the artists were like, "But I'm in the middle of a shot. Oh, I can't just stop here and then go to Letterman." And the IT department told them, "You've been working off of your remote. You've been working from Letterman in this desk here in Kerner for the last 2 weeks." We've been routing you with dark fiber down to Letterman, and so you've actually been interacting with a computer 10 miles away for the last 2 weeks. We were just making sure that it all worked, but now all you have to do is just go down. There's a monitor and keyboard waiting for you. It's locked into the same computer, and it was just a completely. I mean, it took over a year to plan it, and maybe we can see if I get Cliff to come in and talk about that. We'll see what we can do there. And go ahead, Mitchell.
Yeah, we moved we had a full edit suite at the agency that I co-owned with some other partners.
Was it a secret agency?
It was not a secret agency. It was First Team Communications. But
when you left, did you create a secret agency?
Later on.
Okay.
Secret Agency is about 5 years old. But anyhow,
Sorry.
Another story.
Such a great name. It's such a great name.
Thank you.
Anyway.
We appreciate that. The racks were full of gear, mostly tape machines, Sony Digi-Betacam and Betacam machines. And I said, take everything. I told the tech, take everything out of the rack. It just slides out. Clip, boom, it's out. Before you move it, because the moving guys are going to have a hard time hauling that rack around at, almost 1,000 pounds. And they didn't. So when I got the stuff back at the new location, 2 of the jog wheels were busted on the Betacam decks because it was the thing that stuck out, and that's where it got hit on the corners. So remove all projecting elements from a rack. Or better yet, just remove everything from the rack so they can move it and be civilized about it.
Yeah, label everything. That's another big thing there.
Pictures and labels.
Yeah, and for our producers, we have 2 hours of Q&A, and we're going to finish all the questions we have right now in the first hour. So we'll just go into after hours early unless you ask more questions. It's fine. We have more of a Saturday. Next question.
Frojon Banwell from San Diego, California, gives us a web link to an Atlantic magazine article and says, interesting story around Leonard Cohen's Hallelujah and many covers. He asks, do you have a favorite? He says, added Brandi Carlile's With the Seattle Symphony to my collection.
I think that the idea of covers. I was playing with like mixes of things that I really like. I love it when someone takes a cover and really does something with it, so so I think that there's a lot of really interesting ones that are out there. I don't know, the only Leonard Cohen cover of Hallelujah that I really know of is the one from Shrek. So I'm not very cultured, so like literally that's the only version of it that I think I've ever heard. So it is interesting that it was basically a throwaway when it came out. And there's a lot of songs that way I find it interesting to see media that when it came out, it was not very respected and not taken care of. Like, It's a Wonderful Life the reason that we all know about It's a Wonderful Life was because its copyright ran out because they cared so little about it that no one was paying attention to the copyright had to be re-upped, and so it just became free for TV stations to play at Christmas. It was just free content that they could play because the copyright had run out, and that's how it became so popular, and I think that there's a lot of songs like, there's some good examples there's some songs that are maybe not as popular as the original, but are very impactful. Like The Disturbed does an incredible cover of The Sound of Silence from Simon and Garfunkel. And so, their version of it is really good. I just heard, I don't go to very many live shows, but the lead singer for Toad the Wet Sprocket, Glenn Phillips, was in town. It was actually in town the day that we did the Brian Vander Ark little concert. So Brian and I went and got to hang out with Glenn a little bit, and then watched his show. And he played a cover of Mercy, like Peter Gabriel's Mercy, that just stops you, like just stops everything. And he hasn't recorded it yet. Hopefully he'll. I was asking him later, and he hasn't put it on a record yet. But it's incredible. And then you have like you have ones that you don't like as much. Like Maxwell did a cover of This Woman's Work, which is what I think most people at a certain age all think that that's the original of This Woman's Work from Maxwell, but it's actually Kate Bush, and Kate Bush's version is better. so anyway, but those are the ones that come up for me when I saw the question. Go ahead, John.
I think one reason why this particular song is so popular to use is it's in the key of C major, so you can learn it easily on ukulele, because now people can play two different songs on their uke, Somewhere Over the Rainbow and Hallelujah.
I was about to say, every time I think of a ukulele, all I think of is Somewhere Over the Rainbow. Go ahead, Tom.
We were in Ireland, and there was a gal there, Rebecca Murphy, who did a cover on this song, and it was just stunning.
Yeah. I heard that the Somewhere Over the Rainbow was one take. Like he just came in and played it once, and that was it. Like that was what we had there. Go ahead, Mitchell.
It doesn't get any better than the Red Hot Chili Peppers redoing the song "Love Roller Coaster" by the Ohio Players. It's just awesome.
Yeah, I think that sometimes that listening to bands a lot of times have songs that they really like to play. And it's fun to have bands play out the songs that they think are fun, like because they, played them a bunch, or they, that they think that they're good. And I guess there's a great song exploder about Nine Inch Nails, Broken. Is it Broken? With Johnny Cash covering it. And like Trent Reznor's like, Johnny Cash wants to cover one of my songs. And so anyway, and by the way, if you haven't seen for most of us have probably seen Song Exploder or heard Song Exploder. It's a pretty incredible series of stuff that kind of breaks down songs and talks about the history of them and so on and so forth. So there's what service, so I can't keep track of what streaming service anything's on anymore. I think Song Exploder's on Netflix. It might be on Amazon. I don't think it's on Apple. I can't keep track of it. I just do searches for it. No, I actually think that's Apple's secret plan behind the way that they manage Apple TV, is that because you can just search for a song and it just takes you to where you want to go, it's devalued all of the services because I have no idea where they are. I don't know who does the content anymore. I just know that there's I search for it and it shows up and then I watch it. Go ahead, Mitchell.
Yeah, the thing you just mentioned about Apple, I find myself using it more and more as a gateway to to all the services I've got, because I've got the, Paramount Plus and Disney Plus and all the pluses. And if you do a search in Apple, they'll link to it. There's a series I was looking for called The Old Man with Jeff Bridges in it. It's produced by George R.R. Martin. And I found it on Apple. I bought the season pass on Apple. And as far as I'm concerned, it's coming from Apple. That's where I go to get it.
I think that George R.R. Martin they could just do a reboot of seasons 5 through 8 of Game of Thrones. Like literally, like we're just going to go back or just reboot the whole thing. They should just I bet you that if George R.R. Martin said, "Okay, I finished the books, let's just reboot Game of Thrones," I think a lot of us would watch a reboot as long as they promise us not to do what they did the first time. So I'd watch it again, like a retake. Anyway, next question.
Douglas Carmichael says, in this tutorial video, and he gives us a web link to YouTube, there is a Logitech C920 camera attached to an arm pointed at the Roland Fantom-07 screen. What HDMI-compatible cameras and arms could work in this application?
Good guy.
Yeah, there are tons. I mean, the C920 is a little soft. When I took a look at that video, I was like, it gets the job done, but it is just soft. And when you're used to looking at something a little bit higher quality, like even in that $300, $200 to $300 price range is the Huddle Cam. The nice thing about this one is it does have HDMI and USB, so you can control it with the remote control. You can zoom in, or you can control it through USB and zoom in. And if you're in Zoom, you can even do far end control and have somebody else control it. We use ATEM Imaging. They're these little tiny cameras. Or Marshall Electronics as well. So ATEMs look like that form factor. They're really, really small.
And they have HDMI.
AIDA, ATEMimaging.com. Yeah, if you watch some of the DV Store YouTube videos, you'll see there's a guy that used them a lot. And then the PTZ cameras are the other way to go if you don't need such a fixed shot, or if you want to zoom in on some of those keys. So there's lots of PTZ cameras, but that's the way I would go, is with a PTZ camera. But if you want more and you want to go cheap, I would go with one of these little ADAs or one of these little Marshall Electronics. They make a series of these little tiny cameras, these small form factor HDMI cameras.
I really wish that Blackmagic would update the little micros. The micro cinemas are just, I think at one point, I had 10 or 12 of them. We used them all the time for all kinds of things. So you just put them in those little places and then you can shade them. I mean, that's the big thing, is that they just fit into the switcher with everything else that you're doing. I think if they updated it with a new chip, as well as the ability to have a high dynamic range and all the other color science and everything else, I think they'd sell as many as they could make. It's a really great form factor that's there. Next question.
James Fosline in Minneapolis. How well do the Blackmagic PCC do with fireworks? Any settings you'd suggest?
Go ahead, Mitchell.
I'll give you some general settings for cameras shooting fireworks. In fact, I talked to my DP partner about shooting fireworks in general, and he tells me that the biggest mistake most people do is they close the aperture down instead of open it all the way up. The other thing is to keep any kind of focusing, autofocus. Well, I don't think the Blackmagic Pocket Cinema camera has that. Set the lens to infinity and have fun.
Yeah, I'm going to try to shoot some. I don't know if I'm going to go to any fireworks. The fireworks aren't from my house. You can see a couple shows, but you can't see them very close. They're off in the distance. By the way, I will say that if you're ever in Denver, the best place to see fireworks is Lookout Mountain. It sits over top of Denver, and you can see 7 or 8 at the same time. And they're not that far away, and they're just it's the coolest experience. And people kind of gather up there to see them, and it's amazing. I don't know how busy it is now, but it wasn't bad. It's hard to get to. It takes a while. So go ahead, Mitchell.
Yeah, I'm going to drag my FX3 Sony and my ZV-E10 out to shoot fireworks. And one of the tests I want to do, and this is another thing that my DP buddy suggested, is trying a neutral density on one of the cameras. Of course, it would have to be the FX3 to see how that affects it, because the cameras are so good now that you're not. In the old days, it was all a matter of noise, but the cameras are so good now that you're not going to get any noise. So doing that would make things pop a little more.
Yeah, go ahead, Tom.
Well, I'd say watch out for overexposure. Do a real quick review of some of the early fireworks, because overexposure will just wash out your colors and they're gone. And then stop down and see how it works from there.
Yeah, I've always used I know that Mitchell just said it was a mistake, but I always have stopped down for what I've been doing to get all the light get all the detail in it. Like I find that if I open it up, I just get white. Go ahead, Mitchell.
Yeah, shoot log. If you shoot log or law, that'll help.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I'm just thinking when I was a kid, we actually would get permits to use 3 and 4 inch mortars. I realized that we got a permit for it. We didn't do it illegally. We just, but you can't get it. You can't unless you're pro. You can't go over 4 inch mortars, but you can do 3 and 4 inch mortars. And I was thinking it'd be really fun to put a drone up there and just shoot at it. Like you would never hit it, but like to get it at the right height, you wouldn't have to worry about trying to weave through somebody else's work. You could just fire. You could fire mortars at the drone and get some great shots. And
isn't there a famous shot in Vegas where they fly them right? I think John would know. Flow the drone right through the fireworks. It was amazing. It didn't get blown.
There's
up.
a couple people that have done it. If you look for drone fireworks, you'll see lots of people who have flown drones through fireworks. I will admit, looking at some of the stuff that's happened in Australia and China, I like fireworks. I really, when I grew up, I loved fireworks. But the drone formations are amazing. Like I think there's a lot more to them. Admittedly, I think that what ruined me for fireworks, not because we're talking about it, because here in the United States, there's lots of fireworks this weekend. But I used to work on fireworks crews, so I used to like lower, the 10-inch mortars and 12-inch mortars and stuff like that, and I'd work the crews. the big thing they tell you when you're lowering them is don't put your head over the mortar. like that. You always lean back. You always lean back when you're doing it. Don't put your head over the mortar. And I was always like, why? I was like, because if it somehow goes off, there's going to be a lot of paperwork. Like was what I was told. So anyway, and you won't be filling it out. So I think that after I did that, it was so much fun because you were underneath it, like you were off to the side, but it was so much fun to work on those that everything else, it kind of ruined me because it's like having really, really expensive wine for a while and then going back to table wine. And you were just watching it from the outside was really hard after that. So for me, looking for something new, I find that the drone formations are just unbelievable. I think just what they're getting those little drones to do with lights is just stunning. Go ahead, Mitchell.
I'm trying to break my record of 4 answers in one question.
Yeah, exactly.
I just did. When you're putting the mortar into the tube, does the fuse point down and then come up, or do you the square thing at the bottom of the ball?
It's at the top. Well, so the way it works is that the fuse is it's not a fuse. It's an electronic. It's got a tail on it that they plug in. So it's not plugged in when you put it into the mortar. And this is even back in the 90s. And so basically, because it was all fired electronically, so they would, because what they did is they basically had it wasn't a click track, but it was a timing track, and they'd play and they'd play that, but they had a guide track that would just then set off everything electronically, so that it would all go to the music. And so, because it had to fire, of course, they had to do all the timing, so that when it goes off, that timing track has to be ahead of the music. And so they time it so that with all the trajectories and everything else, and even back then they had like a little PC that had a simulator, so they could simulate what it was all going to look like and how it would all, these little graphics. They weren't very pretty back then, but they were kind of nice, and you could kind of get a sense of and that's how they designed it. And then, for the big companies, they actually, there's places that they just set them off to see how it's going to look. So there's and a lot of that's actually done in Western Pennsylvania, and Vandergrift is where the biggest fireworks company in the world is, or in the West. I mean, there's some big ones in China, but and they make all the fireworks there. It's kind of funny. They have these little huts that are pretty far away from each other where they make all the fireworks so that the huts can blow up. They're all set up, but they're far enough away that any one of them could blow up and it wouldn't set the other ones off. And so but that's all, just north of Pittsburgh. And so, the fireworks, by the way, the fireworks displays at Pirate Games are the best because of that, because that company does them and they show off their work. And for some reason, I just can't think of the Italian name for it right now. And it's just escaping my brain at the moment. So anyway, it goes to the top of the mortar, but then it comes around the mortar, so you can feel the ridge of it going down to the bottom. Of the mortar there, and on a large mortar it won't matter. But yeah, but you're hanging it. When I did it, you would put it into the top, and you literally use the guide. Use the cable. It had a small wire, braided wire that was woven into it, so that it could handle weight. So and then it was hooked to it, and so then it would so it would go under and you could lower it down, but you lowered it down very carefully. Like you were always, even though there was very little chance. I mean, it's pretty stable. Like the fireworks themselves are relatively, I mean, it's just, black powder and lots of other things, strontium, this, that, and the other thing, and some naphthalene and all that stuff. And so it's not stuff that is particularly volatile. It definitely needs flame to set it off. It's not going to you're not going to drop it and have it go off typically, but you're still worried about it. And everyone talked about it all the time, because it was afraid that you get a spark, you get anything else. So, it's something that everybody, I mean, when you're working on a crew, everybody talks about it, like literally everyone has fun and they talk about, they're kind of fatalistic about what will happen if there's a lot of good jokes about people dying, that's what happens on a crew like that. But this one, it was kind of like, if you drop this one, it'll clip your nails up to your elbow kind of thing. Those are the kind of jokes that they would, that they would tell during when they were explaining to you what not to do with it when you're on the crew. And you'd always get the same things because you'd have a crewmaster that was, the person does this all the time. And the rest of us, I mean, literally the rest of us, or a lot of us were like volunteers, like local volunteers. We get to go to the thing and we get paid a little bit of money, but it was very little. I mean, literally, it was like minimum wage because I would pay to get to do what I got to do there, and they knew it, so they to follow the law. They paid us minimum wage, but that was usually it. Go ahead, Tom. I was like 20 something or when I did it. Yeah, go, Tom.
Oh, I'm going to butcher this, but is it the Zambelli?
Zambelli. Yeah, that's it. Yeah, so I think anyway, it's Zambelli. It's not Zamboni. Yeah. So yeah,
Zamboni is the thing that goes around the ice.
Yeah, exactly. So, but they're the one. Most of the major fireworks in the United States are all done by that company. And then and again, if you want to see the best ones, go to if you're ever in Pittsburgh during a Pirate game. The Pirates are a horrible team. Great hats, horrible team. Just not very. They don't win very often, but they make up for it on fireworks night because it's just the place is full because we know that it's going to be an incredible display of fireworks. Next question.
Yeah, I couldn't figure out was at the bottom of that fireworks tube, and then it hit me. Mitchell Hill asks, how would the Cedar DNS-2 noise reducer stack up against the MixPre noise assist?
Go ahead, Mitchell.
I am totally obsessed, as my next big obsession with equipment, with noise assist on MixPre. And I asked Mickey, I said, Mickey, look, I just want a box that has noise assist in it and a preamp. And I just plug the mic in one end and I plug the mic in the output in another place, and I'm done with it. I'm willing to go that route. And he suggested this DNS-2, which Cedar makes. It's not cheap, but it is cheaper than an 833 MixPre. So not MixPre, 833 studio devices.
But it's more expensive than the MixPre 10, which is all you would need.
Yeah, well, I just don't like the outputs on it, but I just like the idea of it.
Yeah, so I've owned 4 of the DNS-6. I used to have 4 of these. Here's what I say: it can remove more noise than the MixPre. I mean, than the noise assist. There are especially things that are not fans. So like things that are like clicking, it does a little bit of a better job, and things that are like a weird something off in the distance. And it also, the other thing that the DNS does is it removes echo. Like if it learns, it tends to, like, something sounds really roomy, it'll calm down the roominess of a room. The other side of it is that it sounds digital really fast if you turn it up too much. So you have to use it very sparingly, or it immediately you can hear the quantizing of the image. I can hear a DNS like when it turned up, because I used to, because sometimes I would like go back to the audio engineer and just go, it's too crunchy. Like it's too crunchy. Like you're turning it up too much. And so I find that I can't turn the noise assist up enough to do that. Like I just turn it all the way up, and I don't ever hear the crunchiness. I do hear it kind of breathing, and I hear other things. I just don't hear that what I used to hear with the DNS. We had a DNS-8. So the DNS-8 it's got 8 channels, and you can tie it into like the QL and do a send and return out to it, and it'll just it's a cool box. And so then we can do all of our speakers individually, and then auto, do a Dugan auto mix as well. And the funny thing there is it almost got sterile because it just was nothing. You couldn't hear anything there. So I like the DNSs. We use them a lot. If you ask me, would you take a MixPre 10 or a DNS-2 at this point? I would take a MixPre 10. I can record with it. I can do all these other things. And I think that it's for 99% of the stuff that I do, it would do as well as the DNS-2. Go ahead, Mitchell.
It must be a completely different algorithm because the DNS requires a learning mode that you learn the background noise or the room tone. And then you can adjust how much and how little. And that's probably the dangerous part of it.
Yeah, and it's also just a little quirky. Like it's just, I will say that it was always like, like there was always this little quirky, getting it to do what I wanted to do. So, and you have to get it to sample just right. You turn on the learning, and then you have to make sure that nothing changes. And you don't turn on the learning for very long. Then you leave it off, or you can leave it on learning. It'll just kind of adapt to things as they happen. So you can go both of those directions with it. But I feel like I would at this point. I would not buy a DNS. I would always use a mix. I mean, if I would use something that had that I could just pass through. And again, if I could buy something that's the same price or a little bit more or even less, like a MixPre 10, I would be much more likely to do it because it just has so much more utility. And again, I think that I don't know. I think that Sound Devices spent years on that. Like on that noise assist was not something that they came up with, sitting around a table and said, "Oh, we can just do this little algorithm." I mean, it is some heavy engineering, to do that. And I think they really knocked it out of the park. Next question.
Douglas Carmichael, what KVM extension products are used to move keyboard, video, mouse traffic on dark fiber?
I don't know about KVM over long distances like dark fiber. There are, there's a variety of. I'm trying to think of the name of the. There's a company that makes them in Alameda of all places. That I was just asking someone about that.
Is it Adder? ADDER?
No, IHSE KVM is the one that we've used. So this is it says KVM and beyond, and so this is the heavy hitter for this stuff. So if you're looking for KVM, like heavy duty KVM products, what they make is they make modular pieces. So you go, I have fiber going in, and I have USB and RS-232, and you can have a bunch of little cards that go in, and then you have fiber that goes out on the other side. You have another one that matches it that pops all that data back out on the other side. And so that is really, and that's what we use for like EVSs. It's somewhere else in the building. So the EVS might be somewhere else in the truck or the building or whatever. And we have a fiber connection to it, and we want, the keyboard or the RS-232 or whatever to be connected to it. And that's the company that we use for that. So it's it's IHSE KVM. If you just do a search for that, you'll find it. But that's the industrial version of KVMs. Next question.
Robert Soji of Los Angeles asks, could the panelists please explain the different types of quick release plates for camera tripods? What type of plate is recommended?
Good, Mitchell.
I'll recommend the Arca Swiss. I like using it. This is a Kessler Arca Swiss. Come on, you can do it. You can do it. Nope, it's not going to. There it is. Oh, there it was for a second. Anyhow, what's interesting about them is that they're very common. You can find them out there. The watch out point on the Arcas are if you buy a cheap knockoff, it's not going to work with another plate. The Kesslers, for example, are very well precision made. It's just a beautiful piece of equipment here. It's got a drop gate holder in the back of it that secures the camera. It's not going to fall out. You got to push a button to release it. If you just see something that's on a ball head and it just pops in and tightens down, it's dangerous because if the plate is not made exactly right. Of course, there's a lot of other ones. Ari has their own version. Manfrotto, I think, has a very common type of plate. But for my money, I like these Arca Swiss.
Yeah. The one of the other ones that I've used for some of my smaller rigs, I don't trust them with really expensive stuff, but that have been nice. Are iFootage makes one that is it's kind of a it's called a C-Star Q1S, and it's got kind of it's got a bigger cavity that you can just set down and it just goes lock, and when we send out kits, I'm trying to get people to put the little tongue through the thing or rack it. The problem you get into with any of the general quick release plates is people don't get the plate all the way in. They close it and it falls off. This thing, you just set it down and it's got little ball mounts that it just pops in and locks. And then you have to turn a thing to let it go. And for kits that we send out, smaller kits that we send out with cameras, I've used some of these because they're harder to screw up. So that's one thing to think about as well. Next question.
Robert Soji again. Any recommendations for an outdoor, backyard projector screen and projector stand for under $250?
Under $250. So the funny thing is, I have one that I got. I have one that I bought on what was that? There was one of those sales sites. Hoot? Was that it? Hoot? Well, I can't. Kenneth, did you know what that was? It's like
Woot, isn't it?
Woot. That was it. I got one on Woot. They were like $150, and it's like a 10-foot screen, and it works really well. It's a little projector, but it's not too. I don't even know what the brand was for it. The thing you want to think about as you do these, $250 is not a lot for this kind of thing. You're going to end up with maybe a screen with a stand. When you really want to, when you think about outdoor, you want to think about also inflatable ones, because they're just a lot easier to work with. You just inflate them and they inflate up. The only problem you have to deal with is the sound of the pump. The pump makes it's inflating it, and so that's the only thing that you have to do. And I usually can fix that with bigger speakers. Bigger speakers. You just got to decide how much your neighbors are going to be bothered by the whole thing. Go ahead, Mitchell.
Yeah, to put that $250 limit in perspective, we did one with a Sony laser projector that was $60,000. So, yeah, looked great.
Go ahead, John.
Epson just came out with a Epic Vision specifically designed for outdoor, but it's $900. You're not going to maybe used. You might be able to pick something up used and use that and get one of those little battery units to power it for a couple hours.
Right.
But you're going to have a real tough time at that point.
Yeah. It's a. I was trying to find really quickly to see if I could find you a picture of the one that we used in Cambodia, but we had a blow up screen that was 30 feet, a 30-foot blow up screen, but that was I think $20,000 or $30,000 for that. Go ahead, John.
If you are outside and need to block off the sound of a pump, I'd recommend bales of straw. It'll be a quick sound barrier that is really effective and pretty cheap and easy to build.
Yeah, that's great. Next question.
John Clark in London. When cutting a show with a remote TV, how do you ensure the cuts are on the beat and in time?
That is a big problem. So basically, we're about to test that in the next one. We weren't able to test it for a variety of reasons for this last little concert test that we did, but I sent a 1ME panel to Marcia, so she's got the panel, and we're going to connect her when she gets back from tour. She's on tour with Paul McCartney. so when she gets back, we're gonna try to do another little test where we do some kind of show. So we're hoping to do a little show sometime in the near future, and we'll get her involved and see what that looks like. But yeah, the delay is a real problem, and so one of the things that it's a matter of figuring out whether it's okay to have the audio out of sync. So one of the things that we've been thinking about related to this is being able to center the audio ahead of time. So we can get the latency down with a barracks to a much lower latency than what we can do with Zoom. So Zoom will be 200 milliseconds. The barracks, we might be able to get down to 30, 30 or 40 milliseconds because it's not managing the video. And that might be close enough for her to get pretty darn close to the beat, not quite on, but very much closer. The other thing, what we found relatively successful as we got better at it, was having her call the show and saying, cut this on the next bar or the next beat, or having someone like Chris or I, we just started anticipating where it needed to go with the beat. So when she said, when she said cut, we would wait and hit the next bar, or hit the next beat. That made sense. And so it was a little bit of a trusting the local TD to make that happen. Go ahead, Mitchell.
Couldn't you delay the actual audio and not delay the audio you're sending to her over a barracks and get by yourself a few milliseconds here and there?
Sorry, I don't.
I'm saying is that if timing is the issue, then delay the program audio, but not delay the feed that you're sending to her.
Yeah, I mean, you could theoretically delay the whole show and then have the cuts happening later. So that could be that could be another way to manage it, and it'd be an interesting thing to think about. It's a good idea. Next question.
Robert Soji, Los Angeles. Any ball head recommendations for a Sirui monopod? Weight is a consideration.
Good ball head. I'm trying to see what that one looks like. And I guess the question, so you're really looking for a ball head and not a fluid head is what I'm assuming that you'd want.
Small rig, maybe?
Yeah, I mean, like the creme de la creme for a ball head is the right stuff. It's literally called really right stuff. Really nice. They're ball heads, and they just have the controls on them are you don't have to crank on them, and they do a pretty good job of making that work. So they're expensive. I mean, it's like it's a really pricey solution for that. But there's other ones that are similar to it. But those are the best ones. Manfrotto makes obviously a ton of these that are pretty good. Go ahead, Tom.
I'd recommend looking at Plataball. It's new on the market. It has some interesting features. It's kind of turned upside down for most ball heads, but that also allows you to do panorama shots on the level much easier.
Yeah, sounds good. Next question.
John Clark, London. How do you go about building an audience for a global conversation on a niche topic?
Go ahead, John.
Most niche topics have some sort of social media presence of some sort, and I would join those and get to know people. I would then give away value for free to people to get them to understand your competence as well as what you can add to them before asking them to come join you somewhere else. And then after that, consistency as well as quality are going to be key.
Yeah, it's really helping other people build the content that they're making for theirs takes time, and you find folks that are there, you kind of help them with what they want to do without worrying about what you want to do. Anything where you're building an audience there's just a lot of groundwork, and it's really hard until you've done all the groundwork. It's really hard to convert it into something else, and it's just, I think people get the biggest thing that keeps people out of a lot of these things is just patience, of understanding. I think there was a great thing that Marquez Brownlee put up was like, I think he reposted somebody else's, but they were just like, assume the first 100 videos that you do on YouTube will fail. It's just, that they're not going to, and most people just don't get through that. And you look at, I remember going back when they were on Musical.ly and looking at the DeMellos, the sisters that now have, I don't know, some insane number of hundreds of millions of followers on TikTok. But we were doing some stuff with Musical.ly, and they were starting to pick up speed. And you look back at the older stuff, and they were just still figuring it out. But there was hundreds of things with like 4 views and 8 views and 12 views and everything else. It's just there's a saying, I don't know, it gets attributed to a lot of different people that says 90% of it is just showing up. 90% of success is just showing up. And I think that I think what most people do is they give up, and so I think that is the thing, but also being part of a healthy part of the community that you're interested in. So whatever that niche topic is, there's kind of three groups around you all the time. There are the people that are in front of you. There are the people that are kind of right where you are. And then there's the people that are behind you. The people that are in front of you, you want to help because, they're going to help. They're going to help you move forward. Like if you're truly helpful, as soon as you ask for something, you've spent all of your karma credits. So just so you know, like as soon as you ask for something, so just decide, when you're going to do that. But what you really want to do is, as long as you possibly can do it, you just help people in front of you. In my case, there was lots of, companies that were in front of it. With Leo, I just showed up wherever Leo needed me to show up. Like I just showed up on the show. I didn't get paid for all those shows on Tech TV. I just show up every week. So it's 3 days of work every week that I spent for years. Like literally Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday was me just working on my 7-minute segment on Tech TV. And that was an unpaid thing that I did over and over and over again. Now, what did that do is it got me, and I did it happily. It was, I didn't pay for any marketing, but I developed a 70,000 person mailing list, and that, paid for my company, and so the thing is that, but it took a lot of, groundwork. I talked about it before, but I got my job at Lucasfilm because I was answering questions on AOL, so it's getting in there and serving that market and serving the people in front of you because they can help pull you forward, people around you because they're the people that you're all connected to, and you help the people behind you because they're the next people that are going to be beside you and in front of you. What you want is people that are next to you and in front of you that you helped get there. That you had a meaningful impact on doing it. So you help all those people around you all the time, the people in front, the people behind, the people around you, and it builds up a community that is that takes care of you, and that community is the key to the operation. And that's why I think that some people show up on the panel and so on and so forth. You're helping a lot of other people, and those other people are going to do cool things, and it feels good to help, and it feels good to figure these things out. I mostly do this because I like to figure things out, and so people can give me we get about 50 things to figure out every morning, and so but that's the groundwork that you have to do. And to make a difference. And I think that the biggest mistake I see people do is trying to convert, convert their karma credits to actual credits too quickly. It's kind of like, I used to fish for walleye, and walleye just kind of slurp on your stuff, and they slurp on your bait, and you pull too quickly and it's gone. And you let go. God, I didn't want that. And you have to wait until it's really there, before you ask for anything. And when you ask for something, it's because it's obvious that, and it's obvious what their benefit's going to be, because you've already created the benefit. But I think people pull way too early, for what they want. And I, if I'm asking for things, it's so that I can keep doing, I can do whatever it is more for them. It's not like I need something out of it. I need to make it sustainable. I need to make it bigger. I need to make it whatever. And this is what needs to happen to do that next. And so, anyway, so you just have to you just have to know it's a lot of work to build that audience. Building audiences is not, especially from scratch, is a lot of work. And everybody that has a big audience did that work. They did the work at some point. Maybe it was a long time ago. Now they can just generate new audiences anytime they want. But it's not how it started. Anyway, next question.
Chris Taylor, Carlsbad, California. Mitchell or panelists, have you a favorite Premiere Pro plugin to reduce noise from outdoor recordings, wind, hum, traffic, and so on?
Go ahead, Mitchell.
Yeah, Premiere Pro has some nice built-in noise reduction devices that will get rid of a hum or a steady state noise. The only problem with them is if you go over 20 or 30% on a 100-point scale, you start hearing that digital crud that Alex was talking about earlier. So I kind of use them very sparingly, and if I can't get through that, I go to my trusty isotope RX9, which is a bundle of specific plugins for that very purpose. And I believe Waves is now making one, and a number of other companies. Some of them are more complicated than others. Some require that you do a sample and you run the sample into it and it samples that sound and then reduces it accordingly. Some just work automatically. But if you just have a little bit of noise, you can just use the ones built right into Premiere and you don't have to buy anything.
I think you can use external audio plugins, right, with Premiere?
Yes.
Yeah, so I mean, the best ones, in my opinion, for removing noise have been the ones that have been successful for me in the past are Isotope and Synaptic. Between those two, I've been able to. If I can't get it with those two, I can't get it with anything. As from a post-production perspective. Next question.
Chris Taylor again. Starlink now has FCC approval to supply internet to moving vehicles. Cars, planes, boats, and so on. Will more remote employees be working from their RVs?
Good, Tom.
Boy, this seems like such a bad idea. I mean, changing lanes to get the best connectivity, driving slowly in the left lane to avoid trees so kids can watch their movie. Do you really think this is a good idea? But as far as employees in their RVs, perhaps, but they can already do that.
Yeah, I mean, between cellular and, what is nice is that the Starlink lets you go anywhere, like anywhere that it can, you don't have to worry about whether you're getting cellular. I think that I had a friend who sold his company, and then he sold his house, and then he bought like the craziest RV ever. Like, he sent me pictures of it. It looked like this giant spaceship that he and his family, he had 2 kids, and they decided they homeschooled their kids and just were somewhere. Every time I got on the phone with him, I'd be like, "So where are you?" Like, I'm in South Dakota, or I'm in Montana, or I'm in whatever. And he would just wander around the U.S., around North America actually, and maybe somewhere different. And he was just using cellular for that. Now, he didn't have to go into a lot of meetings. I think that's the challenge there. But I think the Starlink is pretty interesting. I do think, we're really getting to a point where there's just going to be an explosion of virtual and mobile people working all over the place, and I think that part of that was WeWork. We even used it. Like Pixcore used WeWork for a while, where we have some of our folks just working out of a desk, there. So I think that those are all things that have been happening for a while, and I think that we're about to see a big explosion of those things, and so it's going to be really interesting. Next question.
James Fosline, Minneapolis. For drone shows, patterned fireworks, what kind of light source would they use?
Good, Tom.
Well, you'd be surprised at how little light you need to have when you're up against a black background. Takes me back to the 60s when I was putting in a studio transmitter link with my chief engineer, and he held up a 60-watt bulb on South Mountain, 15 miles away from the studio, and I could see when he turned that on and off. So simple LEDs will be plenty. Yeah,
it is amazing how far light goes. It's you don't need that much power. I mean, that's the problem they all have with that is the problem that they have. I'm sorry, I was trying to find something for you about lights. With lasers and stuff with planes. For some reason, what popped into my head is there's has anyone seen the there's a famous thing about a lighthouse versus a ship. So it's like the captain on a ship says, please divert your course 15 degrees north to avoid collision. The person on the other side says, recommend you divert your course 15 degrees south to avoid a collision. And the captain says, I'm a captain of the U.S. Navy ship. I say, divert your course. The other side says, no, I say again, divert your course. And the captain says, this is the aircraft carrier USS Lincoln, the second largest ship of the United States Atlantic. We are accompanied by 3 destroyers, three cruisers, numerous support vessels. I demand that you change your course 15 degrees north. That's 15 degrees north, or countermeasures will be undertaken to ensure the safety of the ship. And the response was, this is a lighthouse. So it's every time I think of lights in a distance, I always think of that little back and forth. Whether it ever happened or not is unknown. Go ahead, Tom.
Oh, and just think about how much light pollution we get from everything.
Yeah. I noticed that a lot here. I grew up in the middle of nowhere where we could see, whatever we call the Milky Way. You see that ridge every night if it wasn't cloudy for where I grew up, and you can barely ever see it here. But I'm going back. I'm probably going to be joining all of you from Pennsylvania sometime in the middle of July for a week, and I'm looking forward to laying on the dock in the middle of the night, or at night, looking up at the stars, because it's quite an experience. Next question.
Speaking of nighttime, Vincent Alvarez from Bellingham, Washington brings up pop culture. My wife has never seen the Twilight Zone, original 60s TV series. I think I can hold her attention for about 4 episodes. Which episodes should I show her to get her hooked? Something about cornfields comes to mind.
Go ahead, John.
My favorite episode is William Shatner, Nightmare at 20,000 Feet, with the crazy guy in the monkey suit on
Don't
the wing.
look out the window.
And they remade that one, right, for the film, The Twilight Zone. They made it with John Lithgow, and it was that was a great episode. Yeah, no, absolutely, and it's a good one. The other one that I would, so I do think that's a good one. The other one that I just can't think of the name of. I'm trying to. It is the one where the guy hates being around people, and all he wants to do is read his books. And so then there's like I don't remember what happened. Was it a nuclear holocaust, or it was like something that happened that the whole everybody in the whole earth was killed. And he's out alive.
Burgess Meredith was in that one.
What is it? What was that called? And anyway, he breaks his glasses. Sorry, I ruined it. And so I there's a spoiler there. He breaks his glasses.
Excellent episode. So
he's by himself. He can finally read all the books he wants. No one's going to bother him, and he can't read them. So so if you haven't seen it, I apologize because I just ruined the whole thing for you. Next question.
James Babbitt, San Diego. Which tilting Arca Swiss mount would you use to mount an iPhone on a monopod?
Go ahead, guy. Oh, Tom. Sorry, Tom.
Okay, let's start with the iPhone into the small rig, get your Arca Swiss mount, and then go with that Plataball I talked about earlier.
There you go. Now go ahead, guy.
Yeah, the one we just got for Tony, I was trying to get a picture of it real quick, is the Mi Photo Sidekick. It has 1/4-20 on the bottom, and then you can rotate it, and it's metal. And the nice thing about it is it condenses back down, folds like a little transformer, and so you can put it in your bag, and it's nice and folded up. I also took that to Infocom and found it very handy if you're doing any kind of like Instagram-type live videos. It's nice to just be able to set it down and have something that's portable, but it also does the job as far as being able to articulate into the spot that you want, but it's made of metal, so it's heavy duty. It's about $52.
Next question.
Douglas Carmichael. In ILM's early days, they used the name the Kerner Company on signage to ward off curious intruders. What are some greatest hit code names that you've heard of?
Go ahead, John.
Operation Mincemeat.
What was that?
It was, there's a Netflix documentary about it, but it was a group of British spies who tried to trick Hitler into thinking the Allies were landing on a different beach than they actually were for D-Day.
Yeah, we had code names for every client, so we could talk freely and we wouldn't feel like and we never told the clients what their code names were because we didn't want them to. And then they'd be condensed down to codes. So I don't know if they're the best ones. It's just ones we used a lot. So we had, but the big thing is that they were always tangentially connected to the company. Like there was some reason that we gave them the name that we gave them. So like for instance, Google was Atari, and now the reason that was Atari was so all of our codes were all ATR for Google, and the reason we did that was because the Google building in Paris is right next to the Atari building. so there was always some reason that we gave it that. So it was next to the Atari building. And I had to come up with a code really quickly. And then Facebook was Edison for a lot of obvious reasons. So but we had different ones for each code, and we had codes for the companies and codes for the projects. We'd make them up, and there'd always be like a half an hour to an hour. The codes for the companies would take a week or two for us to figure out, because there'd be like this all talking about which code would be and why it's that code, and and then so it's fun. It's a fun little thing. It's useful, by the way, to have codes for your things, so that when you're talking, on a phone somewhere, you're not saying Google or Facebook or whoever you're working for. You're just saying something that's relatively unconnected. So lots of those things are good. You'll also notice that in phones, we almost always say the client. so that like we try to avoid any reference to the actual company or the actual project that we can. So that's why it's the project, the client, in almost everything. And then when we need to say it, we would call it by its code name. But those are things that are just, basic things to keep in mind if you're working on higher profile projects. You don't want to throw those around, even if you're walking, through you just don't want to be in a plane or a subway or anything else talking to someone about something and have it, suddenly get a lot of interest that you don't need, for that. So next question.
Guy Cochran, Seattle. GoDaddy charges a premium for annual domain renewal fees. Where would you suggest shifting dozens of active and inactive domains to?
Yeah, GoDaddy is the worst. Maybe network, whatever, is maybe worse. But GoDaddy they're just a bunch of shysters. I don't have any other way to say it. I mean, they're just a horrible company. Go ahead, John.
I was on GoDaddy for years. I used to register domains when they were free back in the late 80s.
I used them for years too, which is why I have such a strong opinion about them.
And so I moved all my hosting to WPX.net, but I still use GoDaddy just for the name for names, but all my hosting is on WPX.net. I don't know who's good out there now for
Hover.
Maybe Hover, yeah.
They're great. Go ahead, Mitchell.
Network Solutions, they're a top tier company. In fact, they're in Herndon, Virginia. I think they literally at one point were control of all of them.
Yeah. Network Solutions is the one I don't like either. So that's what I started with. Hover is great. I have probably 100 different URLs on Hover, and they're as inexpensive as you're going to get. It's easy to find every kind of URL. Your interface is great. The customer service is amazing. And I got into them because at one point they were a sponsor for Twit or whatever. And I just looked at them and it was like, oh, this looks good. And I started using them. And then I've been slowly, they have a whole concierge service. So they'll help you move all your stuff over. You don't have to figure out how to get it to Hover. So if you have it on some other service, you can do that. So it's, but I would highly recommend Hover. I've been using them for I don't know how long, but probably at least a decade. And I wouldn't use anybody else. Yeah. Next question.
Douglas Carmichael. What software is used to program and operate drone shows?
You should see if we can find somebody that does drone shows to come on the show and talk about it. But I think it's all hand coded right now. I think these are all proprietary. I don't think there's any software that does it right now. There is software that does it. I don't think any of the software is public at this point to make that work. Although I bet you could do something where you could find some way to simulate some of those things. The problem is there's so many simulations you have to do because you have to make sure they don't run into each other. So all the trajectories of all the things that have to be coordinated and everything else, it's amazing. Next question.
Eric Nathan from Bellingham, Washington. What's a good resource for training on DaVinci Resolve? I'm looking for a good starting point.
And by the way, we'll end a little short if we don't get a couple more questions. No pressure, but just letting the producers know. I think the best resource for this is Ripple Training. So Ripple Training is probably the best place to get it. They've got some great startup videos. They've got color correction videos. They've got lots of things. I think the other place to go is hidden in the somewhere in the Blackmagic site, I can never find it, is the training that they do. So they have like 4-day courses on Fairlight and 4-day courses on things that are all done over Zoom. And it's a pretty good program. And the trainers are really clear and very good at what they do. And so I would recommend, but the first thing I would do is do Ripple, take all the Ripple training courses. If you get through that and you do some of the Blackmagic stuff, that's about as far as you need to go to get I mean, I think that after that, it's just a matter of doing stuff. So, and we're hoping to do more in the near future. So stand by. Like the big thing that you're missing once you get once you have all the footage. I mean, I'm sorry. Once you have all the training, the big thing you're missing is footage. Like footage that you can actually use and we can work together on. So I'm working on getting some stuff for all of you to be able to cut together. To play with. So then we can all work on it together. Next question.
Alton Christensen from New York City says probably the most interesting way to light a round table. And he tells us it's the NATO summit last week and gives us a Google Photos link.
That is an awesome idea. So if you're listening to this, what they did there is they have a huge soft light. So they have a round table. And then they have it's a pretty cool, in general, I would say that's a pretty cool layout. They have a round table, and then the giant, and then they have these kind of, I guess, confidence monitors that are in front. I don't know how useful those would be, but then they have this giant, what almost looks like a parachute upside down that is lighting, all of the everyone around the table. Yeah, I like it. I think I don't know what it looked like when they were actually shooting folks, so maybe it isn't as good as it looks, but it looks like it would work really well. We've done a lot of things with air stars where we put big balls in the center that just light people up, or a whole bunch of them to light people up. But this one looks particularly interesting. Yeah, it's cool. Next question.
Douglas Carmichael, with Starlink having FCC approval to supply internet service to moving vehicles, could Starlink, combined with IPTV service, be a serious competitor for old line TV providers, Dish, DirecTV network?
Yeah, I mean, I think everybody's a competitor to Dish. I mean, Dish has the advantage of momentum. Or just mass. They just have a lot of people, and nothing happens overnight. People who have a Dish setup, my parents have Dish, and I don't think they're going anywhere anytime soon. They're just they're comfortable with it. It does what it needs to do. And they still have bandwidth issues, so it's not as easy for them to do. So, anyway, so that, yeah, I think that, I think that Dish is going to have a lot of issues staying relevant as more and more bandwidth becomes more and more ubiquitous. So I think that's the big challenge for them. Next question.
John Clark in London. How do you simplify life when you have so many production opportunities?
You have to figure out which ones are really going to move you forward. I think that's the big thing is like when you have a lot of things in front of you, you have to prioritize, like these are the ones that are actually going to have some output that's there. The first thing to do is always to solve your paying the bills. Like you just got to stay focused on how do you pay bills. But once you get to that, you want to figure out what's the next thing that's going to take you there. And I've said it many times. I usually have 3 things that I'm working on. There's always one that I'm trying to get rid of. That used to be what paid the bills, the one that's paying the bills, and the one I'm trying to get to. And that can be within a company. That can just be businesses that we're doing. Doesn't have to be from company to company. It can just be for Pixelgord. I did that for 20 years, but it was different business models, of things as we kind of moved down the path of this is the next thing we want to get into. So I usually, you could always tell what I thought of where something was in the company because I was either on site or not. so if I wasn't on site, it meant that it was something that was just holding the space and generating revenue but if I was on site, it was something we were trying to figure out and trying to move down the path. And so that was usually, I probably shouldn't have told people that, but that was kind of how I approached a lot of those things. Go ahead, Kenneth.
I would just suggest that if production opportunities means people knocking at your door to do work for them, your rates are too low. Raise your rate. The people who like your work will pay it, and the people you don't want to work with won't, and life gets easier all the time.
Usually what I did there is I usually raise the rate between clients, not for a client. So I don't usually change the people who I'm already working with. I would wait for something to change dramatically in what they wanted so that I could charge, what it needed to be. Usually it wasn't so much that I would charge more for something, but we'd be doing something more aggressive. But new clients, I'd be like, oh, well, this is the rate for that. But I think that you don't want to, again, the danger of raising rates is that you can raise them too much at one time and suddenly you don't have anything and it's really hard to go back. So next question.
Robert Soji, Los Angeles. Any opinions on using Google to handle domain registrations?
I have to admit, I didn't even know they did that. I didn't know that Google did domain registrations. Interesting. Yeah. Maybe. I guess I'm so tied into Hover at this point. It's just easier to manage it all in one place. Go ahead, Guy.
Yeah, after getting, a gazillion of those GoDaddy or domains expiring, pony up, whatever, $12, $24. I can't remember what it was, but I just started adding them up. And I mean, we get charged thousands a year for these. Yep. And a lot of these are just, kind of keeper ones. And some I just let lapse. But I did a quick Google search and I saw the Google domains as an option. So I went ahead and signed up and it seemed pretty easy to do. The other one, I think it was cheap domains or something like that. People were saying that by the time you add in the ability to control and point the DNS somewhere, you're paying another $3 or something like that. So it's like, may as well just use Google because it's a nicer, slicker interface, which I found it to be fast, responsive, and it's just super simple, like how GoDaddy's is. Right. I'm just trying to get away from GoDaddy because I want to move over. We have like probably 40 or 50 domains that I just need to move. Or I think I got a problem where I just want to buy domains. I don't know what it is.
Here's the problem. You get an idea and you're like, oh, I'm going to use it. It's hard to give it up because you're like, you had some idea and I have all kinds of goofy ideas. And then I go register the domain and then I go, oh, and it's like, I find that deleting the domain, letting it lapse is kind of letting the dream go by. Like you're just like, I've decided that's never going to happen. And I think that sometimes I'm willing to pay $14 to hang on to that dream for a little while longer. Anyway, next question.
You never know. Mitchell Hill asks, is the White House using a standing set for broadcasting their virtual meetings?
Yeah, go ahead, Mitchell.
Yeah, they have a set. I've seen it before. I have one of the press room that Dennis can show if he wants to. And it's got the same style of setups with the monitors around the perimeter of the room so they can reconfigure and some roll-around desks. I think that's the press room. I might have given you the wrong image, Dennis, but needless to say, they appear to have a set that they always do their virtual meetings in, and they reconfigure it depending upon what the usage is.
Yeah, I'm looking at it right now. It's an interesting. I think that I don't know if that's the press pool or not.
I think that one's the press room. I might have given Dennis the wrong one to put up, but I've seen that one, and I've seen another one where they have these roll-around desks. Like the president will sit in one, and their guest might be 2 or 3 other cabinet members or somebody. A big screen that brands the event, a semicircular lighting grid on looks like plaster, and lights, like light panels all the way around. It looks like it's not something very portable. And I don't know if it's in the actual White House or not.
No, I think that's in the White House. I don't know I'm just trying to picture what building that's in or where it's at, but I do think that's in the White House because here's the thing is you always want to keep everything in the White House because it's a security nightmare to move people in and out, and so, and resetting things up, it's better to have it all, checked out and in there. And so I'm going to guess that it's in the White House or the EEOB, and that's right next to the White House. I do think that what you do see here is a future that I think is coming, which is you'll notice that there's a wide shot there where they have like 5 or 6 people, but every person has their own camera. Like every person is their own like insert studio, so to speak, and they're talking into it. And we're talking to some folks about some events next year, and that's exactly what the big thing that we're looking at is we just have to stop thinking about everyone's going to be on a stage in front of a bunch of people. It's not a great experience for pretty much anybody, like that's there, and it's kind of old fashioned thinking, because the thing is that you want to have, you may have, 2 people in a room, and I'd rather put them in 2 separate rooms, but then you might want to have 2 or 3 other people that are somewhere in the world. And we want to make sure that all of them feel the same. They all feel like they're in the same space. And, we've talked about this a lot in the past, but if you have 3 people talking, they're all talking to each other. The audience is on the outside. They're outside looking into that conversation. If we have 3 people coming in over Zoom or over something else, and they're talking, when this person's talking to this person, the audience is in between them. Like, that is an experience that you cannot get in the real world, is when 2 people are having a conversation, to actually sit, like, unfold that conversation, like what we're doing here. What we're doing here would be really uncomfortable on a stage. Even with this, just 7 or 8 people, that's a painful round table on a stage, and so in a lot of ways, these kind of, so I think that the White House is doing a pretty good job of, figuring that out. Of course, having an election during 2020, I think, helped a lot of folks that, I think the Biden campaign was pretty aggressive about how they, handle online stuff. And I think they learned a lot. And so I think you're seeing kind of a next generation approach to that. And I think you'll see a lot more of that as it moves forward. Go ahead, Mitchell.
How big a crew is it that works in the White House for that kind of work? Obviously, they have people that are responsible for setting it and lighting and doing all that.
It's usually
stuff.
not. I don't know about this. I don't know how big their crew is. Typically, that crew is about, I think, about 8 to 10 in my experience. There's a digital staff that is the, 8 to 10 people, but I don't know what I don't have any insight into this administration as far as how big their crew is. But that's usually there's a digital staff that kind of manages all the digital stuff, and it can be 8 to 10 or 8 to 12, something in that range. So, next question.
Guy Cochran in Seattle asks, for second-hour guests, would it be of value to give them the option of an RTMP feed to let them have the show go live to their YouTube or Facebook audience? Seemed to work well for WWDC Renee Ritchie.
Go ahead, John.
I think the majority of his views were on demand. I think that second-hour guests should have a whole set of deliverables from office hours that they can use to promote their show on office hours and help promote our brand as well. And so slides and videos, et cetera, all the questions, all that stuff would be super valuable for second-hour guests. Yeah,
and I think that, definitely having them, I think we're just getting, I know that sounds, I feel like we're just getting into a mode where we're good. There are a handful of second-hour things that I think it's probably the best hour about their product that they have, like that we've done, like, where, the Q&A is like, if someone watched that hour, you would understand their product, really, really well. And I think that, so I think that what we need to do also as producers and as panelists is to really know that, we need to know that we're building a show that is to explore what their product does. And, as panelists, we kind of have to be on our best behavior and our best production like it's just, I think that sometimes we'll say things, informally that I go, oh, they're not going to show that video anywhere. Like, like we'll say it'll be like one little sentence or one little word or whatever. And it just means it'll invalidate the whole second hour. So we as panelists have to be much more disciplined in how we present ourselves and what we say. I think we just get a little loose, and then it literally is a sentence will invalidate the whole hour unless I cut it. And then there've been ones we've had to go back and just edit something out because someone said something that it's not that it's not a clean show. It's just, I didn't really build the second hour. I built the second hours of we're excited about your product and we want to find out more about it. Not we're trying to review it or grill you or do any gotchas or anything that would make you uncomfortable. Like that's just not like that's somebody else's job. And I'm not, I'm here to ask. We can ask hard questions and detailed questions, but I don't. We're not. This isn't investigative reporting. We've already done that because we've decided to put you on because we thought it was cool, and I think that's a different approach. And I think we have to really be better at having it be that way. And sometimes it's even stuff that we're trying to be nice and say something. And we just have to, again, the thing that has really fallen down a lot of times is humor, like people trying to be funny and they're not. and I just go, it's not you, Mitchell. So anyway, but someone will say something and you just go, oh, and like you'll every once in a while you'll see me just go like this, and it just means that someone just said something that I can't. And I was like, that's an edit point, and we're probably going to get more aggressive about editing the shows because we want those to be resources, and the reason for that is that obviously it makes it easier for us to have people come to, people want to be on the show, and it also means that we want the company that comes in to take that video and post it on Twitter and post it on their website. And I mean, all this other stuff, because they thought it was a great way to learn about their product is us asking them questions about that product. Now, we're not a PR firm for them, so we're still asking great questions and digging into it. It's not all softballs, but I think that we have to be better as both producers and panelists to really turn that up before. And it's one of the things I haven't gotten into the pattern of trying to push the PR around it, because I feel like we haven't really tied that tight enough yet. And you'll find that I don't like to show my notes. So I think we're very, very close. And I think if you look at the trajectory of what we've done over the last 2 years or the last year even, it's been amazing. And I think we are getting to the point where some of these second hours are like if anyone wanted to know how that product worked, like I thought that the audio desk one was particularly, like, if none of us really knew what that was, and we put it on and we asked questions and it was, we were really excited about it. And I think that the Parsec one is another good example of someone showing us something that we just really dug into. But I do think that we still are a little, we can be a little loose, and we just have to, and again, we don't want to take the fun out of it, but we also want to know that the second hours and the show itself, just gives us a lot of market leverage. There's a lot of people. I think sometimes we think, oh, there's a couple hundred people watching, but I get into meetings with people who are really high up in our industry. I get into meetings and they're like, oh, I was watching office hours last week. So we have to remember that it's not the number of people watching, it's who's watching. And so we just need to, I think sometimes we get a little loose about how we approach that. And we just don't understand that it's like heads of engineering, heads of organizations, heads of things are watching the show. And so we just want to kind of keep that in mind. I get reminded by it on a daily basis. Next question.
Eric Nathan from Bellingham, Washington. Do you have any recommendations for selling a video online? I have a small production that needs to collect payment and distribute a video.
Go ahead, John.
Yeah, I asked in the chat, and Eric said this is specifically for a dance recital that he recorded and he's trying to sell to parents. And I think it's important to remember the product you're selling isn't a video, it's a memory. And I would encourage you to, one, make sure people can buy it at the recital, because 3 weeks later, they're going to forget why it's important. Make sure there's a copy that they can have a copy of, not just access to stream something, but an actual copy of it. I would also send each person a time-stamped link to a streamed version of it, so they can click one link and see their kid. And those things, I think, would add that value to them. That's more than just somebody else recorded a video, because all the parents are thinking is, I can hold my phone up, and what you're trying to market is better quality, better service, and it's a memory of their child.
Yeah. Go ahead, John.
Doug Ferguson does exactly this. In fact, he just finished this latest one editing yesterday, and he has a whole business model built around selling media for dance recitals. So hit him up on Discord.
I'm always curious what parents have. For the press, we got into the habit of those little SD cards that you have, like a 1U of like 32 SD cards. And when we finished, we just hit record on them. I bought the first one, super excited, and all it did is do H.265, which nobody could read. So it was kind of a dead door now. But when they made it H.264, you could record those, and then we just hand them out. But I don't know if enough parents are savvy enough to someone handed them an SD card if they knew what to do with it. But it was great because right at the end of the show, there's a whole bunch of copies, and all you have to do is add one more U to keep on adding more available units. And if people don't buy them, you can just write over them. so it was, so it was just like, it was kind of a zero loss, situation. You record. I had thought about making it available, and I just couldn't figure out whether parents would know what to do with it, because you could record 64 or 128 or whatever, and then if you only have to keep the ones you sell, which is a very unusual thing to do, to have it ready at immediately, but then be able to not have it happen. Be able to recoup it if it didn't sell. Next question.
Josh Kaufman from Pittsburgh asks, booking hybrid events is a good way to attract clients. What are some good methods to transition clients from physical hybrid to digital first?
I think that it is the big thing that we have to do, and the hard part I have is a lot of the digital first stuff I have, there's too many NDAs, and I can't really show a lot of those bits and pieces of them. But I think that I want to try to do more where we're showing those events to people, where it's the hybrid that I think I'm going to get to do a bunch of this fall, and we're definitely in the spring, is this idea that I'm going to put an LED, and it takes a long time for people to get their head around it, but we want to put an LED wall in front of the physical audience, and so we've done a couple of them with monitors and some with projectors, but the LED wall, I think, is where it makes sense. So that you can imagine, instead of having you used to have the curtains, and then you have this big stage and you have a podium, and instead you're flattening that out. So you have just the stage, and you actually still put a little stage in there. I don't know how people feel uncomfortable if it's just a door, if it's just a window. So you put a little stage here where someone can do some housekeeping and stuff like that, but it's a real short stage. And then you have and then people can be in their, their tables, or they can be in a, depending on how you want to do it, but they're all looking at that. Now they're still getting a benefit from going, which is that, they get a benefit from going because they get to network with each other. They get to go see the expo. They get to have dinners. They get to, so they're doing all the things they were going to get to do. Oftentimes, some of the people that are on the LED wall are going to be meandering around later. It's not like we could fly them in, and we'd love to have them, but then some people may not be. They may be coming in virtually to do that as well. And so the big advantage of that is it means that your online audience, and when we're talking to people about it, your online audience can be anywhere, and they're getting they have a first class experience as well as the folks in the room. This is what we talk about all the time with hybrid, is that your online audience in a hybrid event, if you do a real hybrid with audience and the speakers in the same room, the online audience is getting a second class experience, and you don't want the second class experience because eventually they're going to be your largest audience. Like if the online audience is not your largest audience and your most lucrative audience, you're doing something wrong in today's environment. Like, you are screwing it up, because that audience is 99.9999999% of the audience that can't make it to your show. And so you want to be, how do we make sure that they're getting a great experience on their end? Now, the other thing that we're talking about is that digital first also means that you're doing this in San Francisco. You could also be doing it in Pittsburgh. You could be doing it in New York. You could be doing it in LA. And you could have venues. You could have theaters. You could have lots of other things that are connected. So now you could have physical events that have the networking, that have the sales, that have the dinners and everything else all over the world. But the key to that is not making them, again, second-class citizens, that they're seeing the same thing on their screen as you're seeing at wherever your host screen is. And eventually you get to a point where there really isn't a host space. There's 10 cities, and speakers are in all of those cities. They're not, there's some speakers, so you might have a panel of 4 people, and this person is at the SF one, this person's at NYC, this one's at home, and this one's in Cape Town, right? And it doesn't, and the thing is that they are, that is a really powerful way to do this. And so I think that's the future, in my opinion. And I think that we're going to start seeing those kinds of events appear more and more often around the world over the next 2 years. And as they pick up speed, I very strongly believe that that's the future model. That, it's no longer trying to get everybody to one place, or even having one place be the big place it's no more hub and spoke. It's just spoke to spoke. And you can get into things where we already did this with Google, where tons of watch parties, so that you go to Google offices to watch Google I/O, but there was also like accelerators all over Africa that were doing watch parties of Google I/O, and there were, places in, Brazil and all kinds of other stuff that were doing the watch parties, because that allowed people to socialize, all around that, and allowed Google to have people come in to their offices and go to the theaters and everything else. And so that was already happening, and you can see how powerful it was, except they were still, watching. They weren't being interacted with directly, and I think, and they still feel like they're a spoke, rather than having it all completely enmeshed and everybody on the same field, more people will show up, and then it'll become more successful. So hopefully, we'll see. Next question.
Craig McFarland from Boston. What technical things do you find yourself explaining over and over that you think people should know by now?
Mitchell?
Improving audio quality. If I had $1 for every time I had to do that, I'd have $20 right now in my hand. But it's doing a Zoom meeting and improving the quality by talking them into a clip-on lav or a better microphone. It's my biggest pet peeve.
Yeah. Go ahead, Guy.
Yeah, this is just the power of video. When our company was first starting, there was the Sennheiser wireless that came out, and the manual was like this thick, and people kept calling up, and they're like, "I can't get it to work. How do you pair these things? How do you get them to work?" And they would just get frustrated, so they'd call me because I sold it to them, and I'd sit there on the phone 10 minutes, and this would happen every single day. And so I made a video, and it was just one of those things where it was this aha moment of, hey, you're eating your own dog food. You're, using video to let people do this in the middle of the night while you're sleeping so you get to sleep. But lately, the one question that's been asked over and over is like, what's the difference between Zoom 720p and 1080, and how do you get it? And it's just like, all right, here we go again. So maybe I should make a video on that.
Yeah, exactly. Go ahead, John.
Yeah, my day job is training people how to use new systems, specifically call centers, and basic troubleshooting shooting steps is always a tough one. In particular, it's amazing the number of people who really struggle using multiple monitors and understanding you can have two separate things on two monitors and just drag between them.
John. Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah, John Prater.
The difference between condenser and dynamic microphones over and over.
Yeah. I think for me, it's the Ethernet. Like, Ethernet makes a big difference. They're like, but I have Wi-Fi. I have really fast speed. And I'm like, yeah. So that's the one that I get a little tired of. Next question.
We've always done it this way. Robert Soji from Los Angeles.
I want a nickel for every time we're trying to set somebody up and they say we've always done it this way. I would literally be retired now if I hear one more time. I always feel like when someone says we've always done it this way, I think of Man on Fire. There's one of my more favorite movies, but there's a thing where everyone keeps on telling them that they're professional, because they kidnap, but that's their profession. They're like, I'm a professional. And there's this one moment where this guy goes, I'm a professional. And he just keeps on tapping on his head. He goes, I'm a professional. Everyone keeps on saying that to me. I'm getting tired. I don't want to hear it. And when someone says this is the way we've always done it, all I can think of is that everyone keeps on telling me I'm a professional. Anyway, so I don't want to blow them up on the car, but it's, anyway, next question.
Robert Soji from Los Angeles. What are your AV plans for the 4th?
John.
I presume that stands for alcohol and vacation. Yes, sir, I'm in.
Go ahead, Mitchell.
I'm going down to the Delaware riverfront, and I want to shoot some fireworks with my cameras.
There you go. I am going to I'm going to hang out at my house, and I might pet the cat. And hang out with me. If I can get the pool to be perfectly clear, which I'm very close to right now, then we'll hang out in the pool. But that's about all I'm planning. All right.
You're going to hang out in the pool with the cat, did you say?
No, the cat doesn't like the pool at all. I said I might pet the cat at some point because the cat comes up, it will scratch my leg if I don't pet it on the head every once in a while. Like it's demanding. So anyway, but that's about, hang out with my kids. My son's going out to Pennsylvania, so he's going to be leaving on Saturday. And so it'll just be the gals and I probably hanging out and by the pool. So that'll be my heavy duty Monday. All right. To our producers, thanks so much for all the great questions. I was a little worried that you weren't going to be productive enough. But as always, you came through and gave us a bunch of great questions and great conversation pieces to work with. And thanks to our panelists. Can't do this without you. And we also can't do it without the great crew that's learning and figuring this stuff out and putting this stuff together. So really, really great work. Good show today. And now we're going to jump into After Hours.
This is the whispering part.
It's a little loud. You gotta whisper just a little.
Oh, I'm so sorry. I'll try to be quiet. I can't be so quiet.
Whispering.
Great job, Kenneth.
Oh.